I'm excited because today we are talking about visas. Now, maybe you want to come to France, you're planning a trip, maybe it's off in the future, not sure. But today we are talking with Allison. She wrote a book about visas. It's there. And today we're going to give a quick little overview of different visa types. And we're both Americans.
Mm-hmm.
I assumed she was American. I looked at her and I was like, we're both Americans.
Yeah, we're both Americans.
Right? So there is going to be a little bit of an American slant, but we will mention other countries and, but the rules can definitely vary by country. So
Theoretically, they're not supposed to.
Okay.
Theoretically, they're not supposed to. But, our experience is working with a lot of Americans because I'm the administrator of the Americans in France group on Facebook. So, the majority of my clients are Americans. Theoretically, the rules are the same no matter where you come from outside of the European Union. There are a couple of countries that have special programs like Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, some of the former French colonies can have some special carte de séjour types. And British people now, since Brexit, are now subject to the same visa application
You're
requirements.
the same as us.
Yes. And
so
there's a lot of drama around that.
Honestly, this is a side note, but I'm sad about Brexit. I used to love having Marks and Spencer.
I know, me too. I miss Marks and Spencer.
That is the real tragedy of Brexit, is the loss of Marks and Spencer. But, okay, today we are going to start by talking about, so I want to keep it maybe clear. So there are different types of visas. Of course, some visas allow you to work and as you live in the country. Some visas don't allow you to work. Why don't we start with maybe, which category do you think is the easiest to get? The visas where you work or you can't?
Well, the easiest type of visa to get is a family visa for marrying a French person, which I think is the one that both of us have. No, you don't have it.
No. Listen, right. So 90-day fiance, the other way. No. But so let's also mention, you don't always need a visa. If you're coming to France and it's just for a short trip, right? Like if you're an American, you can come to France for up to 90 days. You don't need a visa. You don't need that. But you can't just leave and then come right back. So there's rules. But I don't want to get too deep into the weeds. Do you have anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, so the Schengen rules generally are if you can travel to France without a visa, then it's 90 out of 180 days that you can be in France or in any country in the Schengen space.
So if you come for 90 days, you have to leave for another 90 days if it's continuous. And that's for all of the EU Schengen region. Right.
And so time that you spend in France, in Germany, in
Italy.
In all of these countries. You want to add up the number of days, any day that you spend, even in part, if you take the train, if I were to take the train to London today, today would still count as a day that I'm in France and in the EU.
And they will count those days. You do not want to overstay. So if you want to stay longer, though, that's what we're talking about right now.
Yes.
So the easiest way, she just said, listen, get yourself a French spouse. That's what she did.
Actually, I don't, you know what? I changed my mind. That is not the easiest way because then you have a French spouse.
Pros and cons, right? You
Pros
gotta
and
figure
cons.
out. If you get a visa, it's going to be a lot of paperwork. If you get a spouse, you have to deal with that spouse.
Yeah, and it's also a lot of paperwork. So
right,
really,
it's also a lot of paperwork. Yeah. So maybe finding a French lover might be the way to go. I have a video coming up that's actually about what it's like dating in Paris.
Yeah, but
France.
Unfortunately, you actually need the marriage in order for it to get you a visa.
Right, you can't just hook up with them, right?
Right,
it has to go a little further. Okay, but if you do marry a French person, you can live and work in France.
You can live and work in France with a visa called Vie Privée et Familiale, and that allows you to do any type of work that you want, and it's for 1 year, and then you get 2 years, and then you get 10 years, and then you can apply for naturalization after 4 years of being married to a French person while living in France.
Okay, so that is one option if you find amour. You find some love while you are here. What are some other visa types for people who want to stay long and want to work in the country?
So the two main categories of visas for people who want to live and work in France are salaried work visas and business visas. And the distinction that we're going to make even within the salaried work visa type is there are visas for people who want to stay long-term and have special skills, and then there are visas that are more, to get a certain amount of work experience, to have the experience of living and working in France, but don't provide a path to long-term residency and naturalization. So one of the things that you want to consider from the very beginning when you're thinking about what kind of visa you want to apply for, what kind of job you may want to get, what kind of business you may want to start, you want to think about whether or not you want the option to be here long term. And the other thing that you need to remember is that if you're in France and you're not a citizen, the type of work that you're allowed to do is directly linked to the visa that you're going to get. So if you have a visa for self-employment, you're not allowed to take a work contract and become a salaried employee until you've been here and for 5 years and gotten that residency card that enables you to broaden those work opportunities.
But now, how do you know what kind of visa you're eligible for? Like, let's say
You
I live
take
in
our
the U.S.,
visa
I want to
quiz.
work here. Okay, she has a visa quiz.
So we put together a visa quiz, and in this book we cover 28 different visa types plus the option of getting EU citizenship through Ancestry. And each of those visa types has very different requirements, and there are multiple visa types even within like the salaried work visa category or the business visa category.
So, let's think of a hypothetical. I'm an American woman. I'm living in the U.S. and I don't know, what do I do? I'm living my best life. I'm a writer. Can I get a visa to come to France?
Okay, so if you're a writer, it depends a little bit on are your writing ability, how do you get income from writing? Have you sold books to major publishing houses? Are you a freelance writer? Are you a technical writer in a company? Like, what kind of writing would you say you do? And what kind of job do you want to have? So if you have books that have been sold to publishing houses and you're getting royalties, that's passive income. If you are receiving royalties from a publishing company, it's passive income and you don't have to have a particular visa. If you are coming to France and you want to work as a freelance writer, and maybe you want to publish your own books on Amazon, or you want to write articles or do copywriting or things like that, and you're getting paid for your writing work, or you're writing and you're not getting income from a publishing house, you're getting income from like Amazon royalties or things like that, that is self-employment. And so in that case, you're going to look at the Profession Libérale visa, where you're going to be setting up as self-employed. Mm-hmm. If you're a technical writer in a company, and let's say you want to look for a job doing technical writing in English for a French company because you think that you can use your skills to help French companies do marketing in English-speaking markets, then you're going to look at the different salary visa options. And so it really depends on what you want to do for a job, or for how you want your employment to be set up, and what those skills are and how you're going to be able to market them to a French audience or to French clients.
Now, I imagine, so one maybe easy way to get a visa would be to be sponsored by a company. So maybe there's an American company in France that needs some Americans, right? That needs some workers. And speaking English could be an asset in that case, perhaps.
So, could be, and certainly with Brexit and the fact that British citizens are no longer part of the EU and have to be sponsored exactly the same way as Americans do, it's certainly true that there are a lot more job opportunities for native English speakers that would potentially be eligible for a sponsored visa. Now, when you're thinking about salaried work visas, there are actually a couple of things that you have to consider. One of the most important things to consider is the salary level. Because the salary level is going to be something that determines whether you have a situation de l'emploi opposable. And what that means is that when a company wants to sponsor you for a visa, they typically have to do two things. One is they have to provide a work contract for a full-time position of at least 35 hours a week and a salary, and they have to set the salary at a certain level. And depending on the level of salary and the level of your qualifications as a candidate, they may or may not have to prove that they tried to hire somebody who was already living in France, who already had French work papers.
So let's talk about that for a second. How does that work? Do French people have to almost like have dibs on every job? And then if they can't fill it with a French person, an American or a foreigner can get it?
Basically, but not necessarily French people, but just like somebody who is already in France with the ability to work. So, like, I would get priority even though I'm not French, I would get priority for one of those jobs over somebody who did not yet have the ability to, did not yet have a visa or a carte de séjour enabling them to have salaried employment in France.
Okay, interesting. So people in France have the first pick of the jobs, but then presumably if they can't find someone or, then they can start looking outside France for these jobs.
Yeah, so there are rules about how long a company will have to post a particular job opportunity on different websites. They have to take in all of the candidates for those positions and evaluate them, and they have to submit basically your application and profile along with the application and profile of anybody else who applied to the job. And basically, like, DREETS, which is the Direction Régionale des Entreprises, de l'Emploi des Entreprises et des Territoires, or something like that. There are a lot of acronyms in this visa
we don't
situation.
Have to list
we don't
them
have
all.
to list them all.
There's some extra paperwork. There's some details.
So DREETS is the organization that is going to approve business creation and sponsorship of work visas, and they're going to have to basically agree with the company that you are the best person for the job and that the other candidates that had submitted their application are not as qualified as you would be for the role. So it can be really difficult.
Intense.
It's really intense and it's very difficult. So there are a couple of ways to get around this. Now, one is if it's an American company or a company that's situated outside the EU, there's something called an intercompany transfer visa, which is you can get a contract for up to 3 years. You stay employed by your local company outside of France. They have to follow all work rules and employment law for France, except that your work contract is not French, basically. And they can send you for up to 3 years for a specific mission, and then you have to go home, and there is no way at all to renew that visa in any way. So that's if you just want a temporary work experience. And then you get into a bunch of different visa types that have various levels of nuance. So the salary has to be a certain level. If you have
let's pause there because I just have a question about that. The salary has to be a certain level, meaning they can't bring you in for 20,000 euros a year? Like, meaning there's a minimum or there's a maximum?
Meaning there's a minimum.
Okay.
So the highest level is 53,836 euros gets you a visa type called a carte bleue européenne, a European blue card. And that's in the Passeport Talent category, and that means they can basically sponsor you with no restrictions, even if you don't have a French or European degree. Now, a lot of Americans listening to something like this are going to think, oh, well, 51 or 53,000 isn't that high of a salary. I'm making 175,000 in my job here. Clearly, I'm going to be able to get that salary easily in France. I want to tell you that unfortunately salaries are quite low in France, and
they are, even in Paris.
Even in Paris, and over 90% of French salaried employees earn less than 37,000 euros a year. So
I found this out personally when I applied for a job, and it was like a marketing sort of position. And when she told me the salary, I was like, that's crazy. Like,
yeah.
It was not what it's not comparable like with New York. No. Paris and New York have a lot of similarities, but not in the salaries.
Yeah. And I can give you a link. Maybe this would be useful for people that we can link below the video. There's an article in a French publication called Capital, which is a lot about businesses and employment and things like that. And there's actually a chart of how much salaries are. So if you're earning, if you're in the 90th percentile of salaries, it's this amount. If you're in the 80th percent, it's this amount, etc. So Passeport Talent Carte Bleue Européenne is the top one. Then there's Passeport Talent Salarié.
And so these Passport Talents, these are good for people who are, freelancers working on their own.
No. The ones I'm talking about right now specifically are for people who are looking for salaried jobs.
Okay. Because my husband has a Passport Talent, but he's a freelancer. So this is a different type.
Okay, yeah. So this is a different type of talent passport. So I think there's like 11 talent passports in total.
Oh, wow. Side note, if you decide to come to France, you will notice the bureaucracy is real.
And they are very specific. Like, the rules are very specific and nuanced about everything, and there is nothing that has been left to anybody's interpretation.
The paperwork is serious.
Yeah.
Okay, I've gotten married in France. Okay, I was married in Paris. I've done all the visas. I have my social security. Listen, it's a lot.
Mhm.
Okay, it's a lot of paperwork. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so this is the talent passport for if you have a salary job.
If you have a salary job and you earn a very high salary.
And very high meaning 50K.
53,836.
That's you're basically wealthy.
Yeah. Yeah, that is rich even in Paris. In Paris,
Yeah.
if you earn that salary, you are rich.
So, side note, there's a lot of rent control because you might be thinking, how are you rich, right? There's a lot of rent control and different things like that are in place. Even the price of a baguette is controlled.
Yeah.
And
it's important to know too that in France you can have a very good quality of life on French minimum wage, which is 1,709 euros per month.
Really?
Yeah.
You think you can have a good quality of life?
You can. I mean, maybe not in Paris, but
Yeah.
if you live in a small town in semi-rural France or even one of the smaller cities, you can have a really good, and you are a dual income couple and you're both earning,
if you're
minimum
a dual
wage
income couple and you're outside the Paris city limits, I can believe it. Inside Paris, I'm like, ooh, you can't go out to eat very often.
Yeah, you can't go out to eat very often, but you can have a very good quality of life. You can go on vacation, maybe not flying back and forth to the States or traveling internationally a ton. But yeah, I mean, it's not super expensive to live here. And I find that in general in France, like basic necessities are less expensive.
I agree.
And consumer goods are more expensive than in the U.S.
Consumer goods meaning like cars and those sorts of things?
Cars, gas, but also things like electronics and
That's true. That's true.
Entertainment things, games.
If we need a new computer, honestly, my husband or myself, we buy it when we're in the States.
Yeah.
Because the price is definitely a little bit better.
Mm.
How are you with time?
Oh, I'm fine.
Okay, good. So let's switch gears. We talked a little bit about, these visas for if you want salaried work. And of course, she does have a book where you can get more details because, listen, first of all, I just want to say, the book is thick. Why is there even this much to say?
It's 462 pages.
About visas.
That
lets you know.
There's a lot.
Okay.
But we cover everything that you could possibly want to know and a lot of things that you would never, ever want to know.
There's a lot I know I don't want to know. So let's talk about visas for freelancers, right?
Sure.
Because I was in Thailand for a while. I was in India. I did the whole digital nomad thing. So it's still close to my heart. So for people who work online or they work for themselves, digital nomads, how's the visa situation work for them?
Okay, so the first thing that I want to say is there is no visa for being a digital nomad in France, which I think is a good thing, and I don't want there to be.
Oh no! She doesn't
and I
like
know that's
us.
controversial.
She doesn't like us.
No, but I'm going to explain why. So right now, if you are a digital nomad, if you are self-employed, the visa that you're going to want to apply for generally is going to be the Profession Libérale visa. And that's a visa for self-employment. It allows you to set up a business as something called a micro-entrepreneur. And basically what they're looking for this visa is that you earn 1,700 euros per month, gross income.
Okay.
And there's a max income of 77,700 euros per year in 2023. It goes up slightly every year. If you go over that, it switches into a slightly different business type. We're not going to get into those details right now, but that's the visa type that you want to get. Now, the great thing about Profession Libérale is that you get a visa for 1 year. If you're making your targets of earning about 1,700 per month by the end of the first year, you're going to renew your visa. You're going to get a 4-year carte de séjour. At the end of those 4 years, you will have spent 5 years total in France. You're going to be eligible for a 10-year carte de séjour. Now, or carte de résident. And that assumes that you have at least an A2 level of French and that you've done all of your tax declarations during the course of your life in France.
Yeah, I mean, look, you can't expect to stay if you're not paying taxes, right?
Yeah.
Sort of doing things legally.
Well, see, and that's specifically the thing about the digital nomad visa. And then also after 5 years, if you would like to become a French citizen, you're eligible to begin the process of naturalization. And if you're self-employed and you want to apply for naturalization as a French citizen by decree, they're going to look at whether or not you have made French minimum wage for 3 consecutive years and declared all your income and paid all your taxes on it. So right now, again, French minimum wage is SMIC, the Salaire Minimum de Croissance, and it is 20,508 euros. may go up slightly. It's tagged to inflation. But that's what they're looking for. So getting a Profession Libérale visa as a digital nomad or somebody who works online or somebody who is self-employed puts you on a track to French residency and naturalization. And a lot of our clients are people who are coming to France because they really love France and they really want to be here and they want to create a life here and stay here long term. And so the advantage is that this visa enables them to do this. Now, why do I think that a digital nomad visa specifically would not be great? So there's an idea kind of floating around there out on the internet that you can get a visitor visa if you like register a business outside of France, or if all of your clients are from outside of France and you're getting the money into a bank account in the US or in another country. No.
So you're saying people are trying to do weird things to hide money? Or?
It's not that they're trying to do weird things to hide money. It's that they're trying to claim that they're not French tax residents, even though they are living in France on a visa.
Okay.
And establishing themselves long term. So there's a couple of things. And one of the things that you're going to look at is the rules about tax residence. And basically, you're a French tax resident if you are sitting in France for more than 183 days out of the year. That's one of the main things that makes you a French tax resident. And once you're a French tax resident, you have to look to the tax treaty to determine where your income is going to be taxed. So, for example, the tax treaty between France and the United States says that earned income, so salaried income and business income, is taxed in the country where you're a resident. So in this case, it's going to be France, and France gets to subject your income to social charges and to income taxes first before the U.S. gets to, or before whatever other country gets to.
So your concern with digital nomads is basically that you think we might try to hide our money.
No.
Or not pay taxes in France.
Well, that people are doing this and they're doing it through a foreign business and not paying taxes in France.
I mean, that's an issue, right? Like, I can understand that would be, but we're not all doing that.
No, I know you're not all doing that. But sometimes people do it because they don't know better. And there are a couple of issues with it. And sometimes people too, like, they'll come here for 6 months or a year on a visitor visa and they'll think like, oh, well, I'm not going to stay, so it doesn't really matter. And, you know, it's kind of true. Like, if you're only here for a really short time, like, nobody's going to figure it out and it's probably not going to be an issue. But if you get here and you decide, oh my God, I really love Paris, I want to stay here forever, well, then you're kind of in a mess because you have to figure out how to change your visa status without going back, and you have to show that your business activity or self-employment activity is viable and earning money, but you can't demonstrate that you've been earning money for however long you've been in France because you weren't allowed to be earning money in France. So then you get into kind of a little bit of a pickle.
So I think one big takeaway is if you are planning to come to France, really figure out, you can use her calculator quiz thing to figure out what kind of visa is right for you, but also talk to somebody who knows about taxes, because you don't want to get yourself into a sticky situation. Figure it out on the front end. Don't think you'll figure it out later, because you don't want to get into a situation where you want to stay, but now you find out you've been paying taxes improperly, right? It can sabotage your ability to stay in a country.
Exactly. And it can sabotage your ability to, to renew even as a visitor. It can sabotage your ability to be able to switch your status and to establish residency. Now, the other thing that I want to say about that is, a lot of countries that are coming up with these digital nomad visas, they don't allow you to establish any kind of residency. They are designed to be short-term, temporary visas where you're going to come, you're going to spend your money in the country for 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever. You're not getting into the healthcare system. You're not establishing yourself as a tax resident, and then you're leaving. So, like I said, we work with a lot of people who really want to create their lives in France and who love France.
Right.
And so those people want to be on the French healthcare system, and they want to create a life here, and they want to develop that sense of permanent, get on a path, stability, develop, get on a path to permanent residence and things like that. And so my concern is that if France were to develop a digital nomad visa, it would be that much more difficult to get the Profession Libérale visa for being self-employed in France, and that it would hinder the ability of our clients who really love France and want to stay here long term to be able to do that. So that's my concern with digital nomad visas, aside from the fact that unfortunately there's a lot of bad advice out there about
and
working remotely.
I can understand your concerns, but I'll also say, isn't it nice though, the idea of people coming to a country, spending a lot of money, and not using the social resources too? That just frees up. So it's like they're not using the healthcare system in the same way. Yeah, I can see the positive side.
But you are using the healthcare system, because if you go down the street and break your arm, if you get run over by a trottinette and break your arm, you're still going into the same hospital.
But then you pay for it, you know?
But you don't.
Well, why don't you?
Because the fees are subsidized by...
But if you're a foreigner and you break your arm and you go to the hospital, so I don't know, because I am on the French healthcare system, they don't pay?
They don't pay well, first of all, the fees that you do pay are really low because of all of the taxes that all of us who are paying taxes pay. But then there's also, in a lot of cases, they don't even send a bill. Or if they're sending a bill to the U.S. and you don't pay it, like, what are they going to do?
Right. I mean, that's true. Look, people can be shady and not pay their bills, but I would think you would just pay at the end of your stay. But okay.
You don't.
All right, so come to France, break your arm, leave with a cast, and no bill. Apparently is what we're learning. But, okay, there are other types of freelance visas. I know, because it's the kind of visa I'm attached to. So if you're wondering, Roman, why are you so confused about digital nomad visas? Don't you have one? I don't have one. I don't have this type of visa. I married someone with a visa, so that's an easier way to get attached to a visa. So... other freelance visas. There are other types that aren't designed for digital nomads, just for people who work for themselves.
Yes. So in the Passeport Talent category, there's Passeport Talent Profession Artistique, which is a really advantageous visa type for anybody who is in visual or performing arts. And what's really interesting about this particular visa type is that it's one of the few that allows you to do any type of work contract as long as it relates to your overall project. So, for example, if we've had clients who are musicians, so if you're, for example, a violinist, you can do a lot of different things, right? You can be employed regularly by a music school and have a contract for being a music teacher with the music school and have a salaried position with that school. Or with, for example, an orchestra, there's something called a CDD d'usage, which is a short-term contract for a certain number of days, rehearsals and performances that wouldn't be a full-time salaried work contract that you would normally get. But you can accumulate multiple salaried work contracts for different ways to exercise your musical talents. And then on the side, you could also be self-employed and register as an auto-entrepreneur or micro-entrepreneur to be a violin teacher and do lessons on a freelance basis. And if you were to, let's say, participate in a recording for a film or, something like that and earn royalties, there's ways to do that too. So it really gives you a lot of different options to have multiple types of income as long as they're all related to your overarching, artistic talent.
All of this sounds so complicated. I feel like my eyes are like, what is happening with all these visa types?
There's so many.
I'm back to marry a French person. You need to find someone. Now, marry for love, right? We're not talking about fraud. Okay?
Right.
Don't
fraud. Yeah, that's also illegal. They're going to check to make sure it's a real relationship.
So not fraud. Don't fraudulently. But, there are a lot of good-looking people in France, okay? Just walk around, try to find some love in your life. You have 90 days, okay? Because that's the amount of time you're allowed to be in the Schengen area. Get your Tinder going. I don't know. But yeah, this sounds complicated. Is it really complicated? Like, it sounds like a lot.
Kind of. But, the thing that you have to know is that you really want to approach the visa application process as if you have a very specific project. And the mistake I see a lot of people making, especially if they're going for these self-employment visas, they're like, oh, I really want to prove that I can make money by, showing that I can do all these different things. Like, I teach violin, I teach underwater basket weaving, I do photography. That is not what you want to do. You want to come in with a very specific project, a reason why you want to do it in France, and ideally have some potential clients or contacts or networking that you have done to show that you're going to be able to do this project and make money at it while you're living in France.
And I will say, that is what my husband did. So that was his visa, right? Like, he proved. He talked about how he works with people in France, he can get contracts in France, and he had French people vouch for him, right, and write letters of support.
Exactly.
So if you're a freelancer, that's one way to go about it, and to get this talent passport visa, which is to say, like, okay, here's the proof, here's what I can do. And it can happen, despite how complicated it can sound on the outset. People do it every day, right?
Yeah.
And also another way we can quickly go just mention is education visas.
Yeah, and this can be a really good way to get your foot in the door. I almost segged into this when we were talking about the salaried work visas, but if you do a French degree, so if you enroll directly in a French university and do a 2-year degree, and especially if you earn a master's, you actually have you can have a lot easier time getting a salaried job and getting sponsored for a salaried job, because it removes the requirement for a situation de l'emploi non opposable. So basically, the company does not have to prove they tried to hire somebody who already had working papers, as I mentioned earlier. Okay. There's a salary minimum, but it's lower than the salary they would have to pay if they were trying to hire you from abroad. So it can be really advantageous to come do a 2-year master's program in a French university. There are a lot of programs in English now.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have to speak French?
You do not have to speak French. It is certainly helpful, and you should definitely learn French while you're here. But I would say, when I came to do my master's in French in France, it was all in French. There were virtually no programs that were English only. Mm-hmm. It has expanded a lot in the past 15 years, and there are more and more international students coming. A lot of engineering schools, technical schools, even things like MBA programs now will have English-only programs, or, English-only programs where you're learning French alongside, in your regular coursework. And France actually has one of the highest percentages in the EU, if not the highest percentage, of students who are then able to transition into staying in France and finding full-time employment. So there are really good statistics for people who graduate from university and then are able to stay.
And I know that this is true because actually I'm planning an interview with a girl who is from Honduras who did this, right? She came for school and then she was able to stay.
Yeah.
And so it's not just like a fantasy, right? It's like it's real.
Yeah, yeah. And so, the advantage is that, obviously when you're in a program, you want to look at the prestige of the program, because sometimes, French companies can have a little bit of, they're looking for certain schools or certain types of degrees. It's not like in the US, I think you're a lot more flexible. If you have, some kind of humanities degree, you can go into almost any job. Not really the case in France, but, so you do want to look at, like, what are your job opportunities going to be after you graduate. But if you graduate with a degree, you meet the basic requirements of the job posting, and your salary meets the minimum. Now, again, there are like 7 different kinds of salaried work visas depending on your level of education and the level of salary, and those are all covered both in the quiz and in the book.
And it's interesting because this thing about how things can vary based on your level of education. They ask for your level of education, I feel like, in France, just for weird things. Like, I was applying to take French lessons, and they're like, what's your highest level of education? Like, in the U.S., I'm thinking, well, what difference does it make? I'm taking French lessons, right? Why do you even need to know that? But
I think it's statistics, really.
Yeah, but still, why? Like, I don't know. I don't understand it.
Well, for the visa purposes, the idea is to have to sponsor more highly qualified people who are going to be able to do specific kinds of jobs. In terms of everything else, I
think the French really value higher education and the arts. So it's just interesting to me that it comes up.
Yeah.
So if you want to come to France, listen, it's possible. You can do it. We're here. We're Americans. So it's certainly not impossible.
Yeah, we help hundreds of Americans every year to move to France.
So I will leave contact information for Allison so that if you need help, you can get help. And it's really great to talk to you today.
Yeah, it was great to share about visas. There are so many things that you probably don't want to know.
Lots of things I don't want to know about visas, but maybe you need to know.
Yeah. Well, this goes through like the whole visa process, how to determine which visa to apply for, all of the paperwork you need, all of the acronyms you're going to have to learn about, like URSAF and CFU and
I don't know what any of that stuff is. She's speaking a foreign language to all of us right now. Just know that I don't know either. So, and you can make it here without even understanding.
Yeah,
but
it's very specific, and you're probably not going to need to know a lot of it. But, we go over exactly what documents you need, what they need to include, which forms you have to fill out, where you have to get your work authorizations, depending on what type of work visa you're applying for. And then, how to renew, how to make sure you meet the requirements in order to renew, what your path to residency and naturalization is, how you get taxed.
There's a lot.
How to change your status if you want to change your status.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information. And then the other thing that I'll give you a link for is our French visa quiz, which is free. And basically you answer some questions about your level of education, what you want to do in France, the potential level of salary that you might get, what kind of company you're going to work for, and it will ideally spit out the visa type that is most appropriate for you. And you can take it multiple times. You can
you can change things up. Like, maybe I'm going to ball.
Yeah, some people have taken it like 3 or 4 times, and then they're like, to see what
change the variables.
Yeah.
I like it. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. It was really fun.
It was really fun. Yeah. So get your visa, check it out, and make sure you subscribe to my channel if you have not already. There's more to come in France and other places too. So that's it.